had the honor, the pleasure of welcoming to Southernmost Illinois, Dorthy Burge. Her bio's in your packet, but I just wanted to point out a few things that just kind of blew me away. First of all, she's a fabric and a multimedia artist. How many of you were just blown away by those pieces that she put out there for us to enjoy? Give her some love for that. She is, of course, an educator. She's been teaching fiber art since the 1990s. She's a descendant of quilters, so she's walking in the tradition of her ancestors. She has a master's of art, so she's a highly educated woman in both urban planning, which is a tough program, very rigorous program, and policy. So Wendell and James, you got another policy wonk up here, right? The other thing that's just amazing is her work has been placed both internationally and nationally in museums. And for a Black artist to get into a mainstream museum is almost like the stars rising in the East miracle. I worked for many years to try to help a couple of artists, and it's a tough process. So they only accept the best of the best. So again, we honor and celebrate that with you. She's received the Public Humanities Award. This is also very prestigious from the Alice Kaplan Institute for Humanities at Northwestern University. So without further ado, I present to you Dorthy Burge.
Okay. Thank you guys for being here. We can get started. So I want to start by saying that I come from a long line of quilters. So the person in the pink is my mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, who I knew. She didn't die until I was 17, and my great-great-grandmother. So they all gave us quilts. But at the time, I did not recognize the value of the quilts. So we slept on them, we washed them, and they were just all destroyed because we used them so much. And now I really wish that I still had some of them. So I was inspired when I went to the African Festival of the Arts by this woman. And she did this painting, which we'll see next. And so she did this painting, which was a collage painting. And so I took a photo of it, and then I turned it into a quilt. And so I had these quilts at my house that anytime I saw a painting that inspired me, I would turn the painting into a quilt. This is when I went to Africa and I took a photograph of a woman with the baby, and I turned that into a quilt. Another picture, this is called Quilt with a View. This was actually a book cover. And when I saw the book cover, I was like, yes, I should turn that into a quilt. So that's what I did also. And then my daughter was in 8th grade, and we went to the Black Holocaust Museum in Milwaukee. And while we were at the Black Holocaust Museum, we met this incredible man, James Cameron. James Cameron survived the lynching when he was 16 years old, not in the South, but in Marion, Indiana. And so when we walked in, he was in his 80s, and he started telling us what happened to him. And all I could remember is I kept looking, and I saw the scars on his neck. There were 3 of them who were lynched. 2 of them died. And he said the reason he didn't die is somebody said that boy didn't do anything, cut him down. So they cut him down. He survived. They put him in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And he came out of prison, started the Black Holocaust Museum and 3 chapters of the NAACP. And so this is the quilt that I did of James Cameron. And so I did these little tags so that when youth came to look at the quilts, they would know who he was and what he did in his life. I was in Cincinnati, and I got there late for the exhibition, and somebody said, go stand by your quilt. So I went to stand by my quilt, and I'm standing by the quilt thinking maybe they're going to come and take a photograph, and in walks James Cameron's son. And I'm really glad this is a blur picture because we were both crying. And so he said, I didn't expect anybody to honor my father like this. So we were just standing there bawling. I live in Bronzeville in Chicago and on 35th and King Drive, which is the house where Ida B. Wells lived. And so I did a quilt of Ida B. Wells, and Ida B. Wells moved into that house because it had been firebombed 3 times because the first African American moved on the block. And when he moved off the block, she said, we're going to keep the house. And so she moved into the house. Then, some of you may know, Troy Davis was executed for a crime he didn't commit. And so I was out protesting, and we were protesting, and it came over the loudspeaker downtown in Chicago that they were not going to execute Troy Davis. So we all left, and by the time we got home, he had been executed. And so this is the quilt that I did to honor Troy Davis. I am Troy Davis. Anubis is the person that takes you to the ancestors to see if you deserve an afterlife. The Eye of Haru means God knows the truth, and the Ankh means a symbol of everlasting life. Trayvon Martin was killed. And so I was doing protests, and I had a hoodie on that I had gotten from my nephew because I didn't own a hoodie. And as I'm marching with the hoodie on, I'm smelling my nephew, and I'm crying because I'm thinking, this could have been my nephew. My nephew could have been killed. So that's me when I was first protesting, and I would just go and buy Skittles and iced tea, and I'd be marching with that. And then Hoodies Up Day. LeBron James said we're going to do Hoodies Up Day. So all the people in my family were putting on a hoodie. And so my great nephew was still in his little baby carriage. And so I was like, we put a hoodie on him, and we went and bought Skittles and iced tea. And then I took him out to do the protesting. That's me again protesting in Chicago. And I met Trayvon's mother and father, and they signed the quilt. And then I did another quilt because they wanted to have it in different exhibitions, and I didn't want to lose my Trayvon Martin quilt, so I kept that one in my house. The interesting thing is, this is what happened then. So I go to the DuSable Museum, and there's a woman by the name of Carolyn Maslumi, who is the head of the Women of Color Quilters Network. So I go to her and I'm like, do you ever take quilts from people who aren't part of the Women of Color Quilters Network? So she said, show me what you have. So I'm old. So I couldn't figure out how to pull it up on my phone. So she gave me her card, and I sent her all the quilts I had done. And so she called me up, and she evaluated each quilt. And this is what she said to me. She said, your subject matter is really strong and powerful, but your quilting sucks. You need to learn how to quilt. So then I went and joined a quilting guild so that I could get better at quilting. Then we had this young man, Laquan McDonald, in Chicago, who had a learning disability, and he had a 3-inch knife, and he punched the knife into several people's tires, and people called the police. And when the police got there, they said, there's something wrong with him. We'll get a taser, and that's how we'll take him into jail. When they called for the taser, one of the police officers showed up, jumped out of the car, shot him 16 times. So I pulled the autopsy report, and then I used another one of my little nephews to make him into a quilt, Laquan 16, and I put the bullet holes in every place he had been shot. So you can see 16 times he was shot, and the police officer, another police officer, stopped him because he reloaded his gun and was about to shoot him even more. We were asked after Nelson Mandela died if we would do quilts to honor Nelson Mandela. So these are the two quilts that I did to honor Nelson Mandela. When Mandela was born, his name was Madiba. But when he got ready to go to school, they changed it to Nelson. So you can see the first quilt, he is Madiba, and then this quilt, he is Nelson. Some of you all know Ronaldo Hudson, who was on death row. He committed a crime. He admitted to it, but he didn't tell the story of his life. And I think that if he had gotten the help that he needed when he was young, this never would have happened. This man was born to people who had drug addictions. And so he got transferred from house to house to house from different family members. He had a twin brother. His twin brother was pushed down the stairs and died. His older brother came into the house where they were living and shot up all the people in the house, and even Ronaldo was shot. And so Ronaldo was trying to rob somebody's house, and they got into a fight and struggled for the gun, and the man was killed, and he was sentenced to the death penalty. And so we fought for years to end the death penalty in Illinois, and he was one of the death row 10. And so after we ended the death penalty, they gave him life without possibility of parole. And so this is Alice Kim, one of the people who ran the campaign to end the death penalty, and she was fighting to get Ronaldo out. And so I took a photo of her. Without your help, Ronaldo Hudson will die in prison. And so we did these kinds of banners for all of the people who were still incarcerated, who had been given life without possibility of parole. And there is Ronaldo getting out of prison. After all of this was happening, we started fighting because we wanted John Burge to go to prison. He tortured 141 African-American men and women from 1972 to 1990. And we wanted him in prison. They finally took him to court. He was convicted. He was sentenced to 4.5 years, and he served 3. And that was it. We still have 23 people who were tortured by John Burge who are still incarcerated. And so I was protesting as we were fighting for reparations. And so the first picture that you saw of me talking, I was at City Council asking that we get reparations for the people who have been tortured by the police. And these are other protests that happened. And then we won reparations. So Chicago is the first city in the country to give reparations to African Americans. And this is what the reparations ordinance said. You have to teach about the torture that happened to the police, from the police. You have to teach it in 8th and 10th grades in all CPS schools, Chicago public schools. You have to give a formal apology. Rahm Emanuel gave the formal apology. Free college education for survivors and their family members. Now, many of the survivors had to be in their 60s. So I'm like, no, that's not going to work. How about the kids and the grandkids? So we were just arguing back and forth, and we were negotiating with them every week. And then finally, after Laquan was killed, they agreed to everything we asked for. And so they got $5.5 million financial compensation. However, that meant that each bird survivor only got $100,000 for the torture that happened to them. A public memorial, which we are still fighting to build. We finally have the land. We've raised the money. It's going to be on 55th and King Drive. And a counseling center, the Chicago Torture Justice Center, that gives counseling to people who are returning from prison. And so then I started doing quilts of the people who were still incarcerated. And these are two of them. And then I'm at the pole where they're hanging the quilt, and I walk out and I see Antonio, who had just been released. And so this is Antonio, and that's him and his mother. And then I went to the Lohan Center for the Arts, which is part of the University of Chicago. And they asked me would I do a series of quilts about social justice issues. So there were 26 people who were still incarcerated at that time. So I did quilts of all of the 26 people who were still incarcerated. There's two women that you see here on the unks. These two women were Black trans women who had been murdered and nobody was talking about it. So I did quilts of them to raise awareness about it. We came out with the book, Makes Me Wanna Holla, and students from the University of Chicago went into the prison and interviewed all of the people we did quilts of. And these are some of them. Then Michelle Clopton was one of the two women that we knew about who had been tortured by John Burge. Once again, hanging out, minding my own business, and they're like, Dorothy, come to the Logan Center. I'm like, I don't feel like it. They're like, come anyway. So I go to the Logan Center and I get to see Michelle. That's her brother. She had just been released. Erwin Daniels' mom. Erwin Daniels is still incarcerated. And I tell this funny story about how his mom came to visit me when I was working on his quilt. And she said she didn't like it. She said, she put stripes on my son's face. I said, that's to show people that he's still incarcerated. I don't want him exhibited like that. And then the son called while she was telling me off. And because she was an elder, I was just taking it. And, he told her that he was happy that the quilt was going to be in the exhibition. So she came back and told me that my son wants the quilt to be like it is. And so do it. And we're still in contact with each other now. Stanley Howard. Stanley Howard was one of the death row 10. And we fought to end the death penalty. So when Stanley got out, so I brought the quilt so Stanley could see it. And there he is hugging himself. This is Eric Blackman. Eric Blackman did 16 years for a crime he didn't commit. And when I met him, it was so powerful that I wrote, well, first I said, would you mind standing over there so I could turn you into a quilt? And he looked at me like I was crazy. And then I took the photo of him and I was turning him into a quilt. And then I said, can you send me something so that I can tell your story? And that's when he sent me this incredible thing that he wrote himself. 15 years, 7 months, 4 weeks, 1 day, 16 hours and 33 minutes to be exact. 5,724 dreadful days, 137,416 and a half hours, 8,244,993 miserable minutes. And I won't forget a second of it. I missed 66 of my kids' birthdays, 337 holidays, 16 vacations, 14 graduations, 11 funerals, first steps, first words, all of my 20s, half of my 30s, most of my life. I lost everything, every dime I had, 4 appeals, friends, family, my fiance, my relationship with my kids. At times I lost faith. Other times I lost hope. A few times I even lost myself, but I survived. I survived the conditions. I survived the honorary tyrannical officers, some wolfish, vulturous inmates, a stabbing, being jumped, 2 black eyes, 2 busted lips, 1 chipped tooth, a busted head, 6 stitches, 1 broken nose, 1 fractured arm, 1 concussion, the suffering, the pain, the loss, but I overcame. I endured by never hearing, never seeing, never speaking, never caring, never feeling, never loving, never resting, never giving up. For 15 years, 7 months, 4 weeks, 1 day, 16 hours and 33 minutes to be exact. 5,724 dreadful days, 137,416 and a half hours, and 8,244,993 miserable minutes, all for a crime I didn't commit, and I can't forget a second of it, but who's counting? And so when he gave me that, I was just like, I'm turning that into a quilt too. He told me the story of how his family came to him and said, look, we don't have money to keep putting on your books. So what we did is we collected all the money we had, and here it is. And you figure out how you're going to make it last. So what he did was he took the money that they gave him and he went to school online and he became a barber and he cut hair while he was incarcerated. Then he took the money that he made cutting hair, went back to school online again, became a paralegal, filed his own appeal, got himself out, is now a student at Northwestern Law School. And that is him. And then Albert Woodfox. Albert Woodfox did 44 years in solitary confinement. And so when he got out of prison, I met him. And once again, I said, can I turn you into a quilt? Of course, they always look at me like, whatever. So he took the photo and then I turned him into a quilt. And yeah, he passed away during COVID. So after being incarcerated for 44 years in solitary confinement, he passed away 2 years after he was released. This is one of the Black trans women who was murdered. This is another one of the Black trans women who were murdered. Once again, nobody's talking about it. So I am doing a series of quilts on all of them who have been murdered. George Floyd. George Floyd was killed. And so I have a huge family and I took the young people out and we were protesting. And so I took pictures of my great niece and great nephew and, I turned them into quilts. I have to tell you what my great niece, who was 4 years old, said to me after she saw the quilt. She said, Auntie Dorothy. I said, yes. She said, my favorite color is pink, not purple. I said, well, next time I do a quilt with you, you'll be in pink. So yes. So we have a serial killer in Chicago who has killed 75 African-American women and nobody's talking about it. So when I met this young man, I said, what do you mean? Who killed our girls? He said, we have a serial killer in Chicago who's killed 75 Black women. I said, I didn't know anything about it. So he gave me these articles and I went back and I was like, so can I turn you into a quilt? And he was like, okay. So that's him. He was at the African Festival of the Arts, and he was holding the sign, and he was holding it like this. I said, "No, give me some energy." So that's when he became that quilt. Centoya Brown. Centoya Brown was 16 years old when she was sentenced to life without possibility of parole for killing the man who bought her for sex, who told her, "You're not going to leave. And if you try to leave, I'm going to kill you." So she was sneaking out of the house, and he had shown her a gun that was under the bed. And when she saw him reaching under the bed, she shot him in the back, and she was sentenced to life without possibility of parole. She was 16. He was 31. She is now out. Black pioneers. So this is Stagecoach Mary. Stagecoach Mary was the first African-American woman to deliver mail. She was a formerly enslaved woman, and just an incredible history. Another quilter by Ida B. Wells. Zora Neale Hurston, who I found out later on was a Zeta. I didn't know that. So the original quilt, she was in purple. Then the Zetas told me, no, she needs to be in blue. So I had to redo it and put her in blue.
That's that.
Richard Wright. Ralph Ellison. So those are 4 quilts that are in the American Writers Museum. Then we were doing these protests, and so I did the protests actually when Trump was first running for president for his first term, and I came up with the quilt, "We Ain't Scared." And because I was thinking about everything that was happening in terms of people showing up, like people who were formerly members of the KKK. And so I tilted his head to the side just so that people would know that, they were Trump supporters. And then Black Lives Matter. So yes. This is Colonel Charles Young. Colonel Charles Young was the highest ranking African American in the military, and he was forced to retire because he had a medical issue. His medical issue was he had high blood pressure. That was it. And because people did not want to have him be their person to lead them, he was forced to retire. So I'm doing the quilt. And so you can see the part of it. And when I'm doing the quilt, the 16 women from West Point are kicked out of West Point. And they were kicked out of West Point because they took a photo with their fists raised. They said we did it as a symbol of unity. Other people said, no, you are protesting and you're out. And so there was a lot of protesting to get them back in, and they were admitted back in, and they did graduate from West Point. I Matter, the Black Lives Matter movement. Stop killing us. We have a lot of people who are being killed in Chicago and around this country. Antonio Hendricks is someone who got his degree while he was incarcerated. So I did a quilt of him, and I also did a quilt, and I'm blocking his name right now, of someone else who got his degree also while incarcerated. So these are 2 people who created Blacks Against Police Torture. And so this is Stan Willis, who was an attorney who passed away recently, and Pat Hill, who was a member of the African American Police League, who was fired 3 times for protesting against things that the police had done that they should not have done, and we had to protest to get her put back on the police force. Then COVID happened, and all of the quilters stopped quilting, and we started creating masks because masks weren't being sold then. So we had to create the masks. So there were lots of young people who were not wearing masks. So I went up to them with a bunch of fabric and I said, if you had a mask made out of this kind of cloth, would you wear it? And they said yes. So I made probably 250 masks and gave them out to different people, young people. So yes, this is some of the masks that we did. More masks. And wearing the mask. That was a poem that was done. And so when I gave them the mask, I had the poem on the back side of the mask so that they could see that we wear a mask as African Americans because we don't get to be who we are all the time. So we're wearing the mask. These are the two women who were tortured by John Burge. These two quilts will be at the Art Institute opening in September. They're 10 feet tall. And the reason they're 10 feet tall is they were 5 feet 5, because that's the height that they were. And of course, my daughter comes in and she says, why are they so little? I said, they're 5 feet 5. That's not little. She said, you made the men 10 feet tall. They need to be 10 feet tall. So I was like, no, they'll be happy being 5. So I sent the quilt to Latanya and I said, do you like it? And she said, yes. I said, well, you're 5 feet 5. I said, and my daughter was upset because she wanted you to be 10 feet tall. And she said, well, I did want to be 10 feet tall, Mama Dorothy. So I had to put the other one away and make her 10 feet tall. So they're both 10 feet tall. Oh, this is the woman who started the Public Housing Museum. And the Public Housing Museum just opened. I grew up in public housing. And so I did a quilt to honor her, which they put in the window of the museum. And I think that's it. So do you all have any questions?
Where's the Public Housing Museum?
The Public Housing Museum is on the near west side of Chicago. It's on right off of Taylor Street and Demery C.
And Black Holocaust Museum?
The Black Holocaust Museum?
Yes.
Yes. So the Black Holocaust Museum is actually in Milwaukee. Yes.
She will be with us, this treasure. Give her some serious love. Talk about making a difference in your life and so many lives that she's made a difference. One person can. All right. Well, thank you. I'm not going to belabor the day. I just want to say once again to my co-presenters today, Wendell and James from Restore Justice, thank you so much. Give them some love. They'll be with us tomorrow too. To our faculty, Ricky Fletcher, who's going to be our faculty for the Trucker's Paradise, to Dr. J, who you will hear from tomorrow, and he's a treat, y'all. Dr. J is going to talk to us tomorrow. So see you. God bless. Be safe going home. Thank you again.